If you believe your interpreter in your immigration proceeding, whether with USCIS or an immigration court, is biased and not neutral, or is making mistakes in interpreting what's being said, you have got to speak up. Hello, everyone. In this video, I want to talk about the interpreter that you may be using, whether you are having a credible or reasonable fear interview, or if you're in immigration court in front of a judge. But to start off with, let me just say that regardless of someone's immigration status, everyone is, under our laws, is entitled to due process. And with due process and using an interpreter, it means that you also should be treated fairly within the process. And that means interpreters are required to interpret and translate accurately, word for word, without adding their own opinions, commentaries, or answers. It also means they should not be rendering or providing or giving editorial statements or remarks when there's not a pending question from the officer or the court, or where you have not provided an answer to a question. That is very important. So, what are some things or steps or things for you to be aware of if you find that the interpreter being used is not neutral or is biased? Well, first off, you should speak up as soon as you are seeing this. And the problem that oftentimes is the case is that many immigrants, when they're going through their particular process, they're unfamiliar with the system. And rather than speak up in fear of retribution or retaliation, they stay silent. But don't do that. This is your process. So if the interpreter is not translating accurately or correctly, or adding their own opinions, or adding on to your response, you need to speak up. If you're in court, you need to raise your hand, signify so that the immigration judge can inquire as to what it is you want to bring to the court's attention. If this is at a with regards to a CFI or RFI interview, you also want to, with the immigration officer, you also want to speak up and indicate that the interpreter is not translating what you're saying correctly. Another thing that you should be mindful of and know is that you do have the right to request clarification, and you also have the right to ask for a different interpreter. That is important. And sometimes, guys, you may have to be persistent with regards to requesting a different interpreter, because this is your case, and your case is in your hands. Also, with the use of interpreter, if you do not understand the question, do not answer if you do not understand. And you can ask, please restate the question, and the interpreter should and must translate what you are asking. If you, and you should have an attorney, make sure you communicate this to your attorney. Now, if your attorney is with you and they speak the same language that you do, hopefully your attorney is picking up on some of the same things that you're noting, and they are raising the objections appropriately, because this needs to be on the record, because it could impact the outcome of your case. Be sure to document and take notes. One of the first things that you should do when the use of an interpreter is when the interpreter announces or gives their name, they should also provide their ID number. If not, you can request that. That is important if down the line you do have to make a formal complaint. If at the conclusion of a particular trial or an interview with an immigration officer, and the results, you receive the case file or the notes or the record of the proceedings, and what was interpreted is completely inaccurate, and just not a translated record of what you may have stated under oath, or whether in court or with an officer, some follow-up actions that you want to be aware that you can consider and do. With working with your attorney, you want to definitely work with an attorney, because if you're in court and your particular case is denied, and if it's based on the interpretation that was made in court, then you may need to file a motion to reopen or reconsider based on any biases or inaccuracies in what you stated through the use of an interpreter. And that may also involve appealing the decision. If you're also with USCIS, with a immigration officer, you may want to also consider filing a complaint. And in the case of with USCIS, if this is a credible fear interview or reasonable fear interview, requesting a new interview. It is so important for you to raise the objections, regardless of how anyone else may feel about the objections. This is your case and it's in your hands. So I wanted to just share that with you guys. Your rights as an immigrant in the immigration process when using an interpreter is very important. It's a huge part in the process, because the interpreter is not just someone that is, bridging the language gap, but they are also your voice when you are in court and when you are in an interview with an immigration officer with USCIS. And so if what's being communicated is compromised because of bias, prejudices, or incompetencies, or just anything that is outside of what you are saying, then that impacts your case and it diminishes you having a meaningful process. Because due process does not mean you win your case. Due process that means greatly in part that you have had an opportunity to be heard, to put on your evidence, and to be treated fairly within the process. But if the use of an interpreter compromises that, you are not in the best position to receive your full measure of due process that the law allows. Guys, this video was for just general information purposes. I did want to bring this to your attention because it's often a subject that isn't discussed, but it is so important. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will definitely see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.